Miran stepped into the wide market of the Zurich city, his boots pressing against stone tiles that shimmered with strange blue light. The air smelled of smoke, spice, and oil. Around him, the voices of many alien traders rose and fell like the calls of birds. The Zurich marketplace was always full of movement. Merchants shouted to sell shining stones, coils of metal wire, or bottles filled with glowing liquid. Miran was used to strange sights. He had lived among the Zurich for nearly 3 months, working as a repairman for their machines. Humans were new in this part of the galaxy, and many Zurich did not fully understand them. Some ignored him, some mocked him, but a few were curious. Miran kept his head low, doing his job and staying out of trouble. But today was different. He was walking past rows of stalls when a sound reached his ears. It was faint at first, like a soft whimper. He stopped and listened. The market noise was loud, but again he heard it, a small cry, high and desperate. His heart tightened. Miran followed the sound to a corner stall. There he saw cages stacked in 2 rows. Inside the cages were small creatures covered in soft golden fur. They had round eyes, wet noses, and tails that twitched when they moved. They looked like puppies from Earth, though their ears were longer and their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. The sign above the cages read in the Zurich language, Tifra, for feast and fire. Miran froze. He watched as a Zurich merchant, tall with scaled skin and heavy arms, poked one cage with a stick. The creatures inside whimpered, curling together in fear. The merchant laughed, calling out to the crowd, saying these tifra would taste tender once roasted over flame. Miran felt a rush of anger. He had seen animals eaten before, on Earth and in other colonies, but this was different. These creatures did not look like food. They looked like companions, like beings meant to run and play, not scream in cages. Their eyes met his, wide and pleading. The crowd around the stall was loud. Some Zurich picked out Tiffer by pointing, making jokes about which one looked fattest. Others laughed and handed coins to the merchant. Fire pits nearby already smoked with wood and oil. The merchant promised fresh roasted Tiffer for anyone willing to pay. Miran's stomach turned. He remembered the dogs he had seen back home, the ones who waited for their owners at the gates of houses, wagging their tails even in the rain. He remembered a stray he once fed as a child, how it followed him home and slept beside him to keep him warm. The Tifra in the cages made the same sound as that stray, a soft cry of fear and hope mixed together. Buy quickly, the merchant shouted. The fire is hot. The feast will begin soon. Miran took a step closer, his hand resting on the edge of one cage. The Tifra pressed against the bars, tiny noses reaching out. One licked his fingers, trembling. A Zurich guard noticed and sneered. Do not waste time, human. These are food. Not for your kind. Miran did not answer at first. His heart was beating fast. He looked at the guard, then at the merchant, then back at the creatures. Everything in him wanted to act, but he knew what it would mean. The Zurich were not patient with outsiders. Interfering with their trade could bring punishment. But could he walk away? The thought burned inside him. He imagined the fire, the cries, the smell of burning fur. He could not erase it from his mind. The merchant noticed his hesitation and grinned. Ah, human wants to see the soft ones. They are weak. They have no fight. Perfect to eat. Watch. He opened one cage, pulled out a Tiffer by its neck, and held it high. The small creature squealed and kicked its legs. The crowd cheered. Miran's fists clenched. He wanted to shout, but his voice stuck in his throat. He stepped forward, standing between the merchant and the fire pit. "Stop," he said. His voice was firm, though quiet. The merchant laughed again. "Stop? Why? These are food. Do humans eat no meat?" Miran shook his head. "We eat. But not this. Not them. They are not food. They are alive. They trust. Look at them." The crowd roared with laughter. "Sentiment," one alien shouted. "The human cries for food animals." Another mocked, "Weak hearts. That is why humans will never rule." Miran ignored them. He looked only at the Tifra, whose body shook in the merchant's hand. Its glowing eyes met his, wide and desperate. Something inside Miran shifted. He remembered the lessons his mother once told him: kindness is not weakness. Compassion is strength. He took a deep breath and said louder, "If you plan to roast them, then sell them to me instead. I will pay." The market grew quiet. A hush spread over the crowd. The merchant blinked, then barked a laugh. "You want to buy them? For what? To pet them? To carry them like toys?" Miran did not blink. "To save them." The crowd erupted with noise. Some shouted insults, others laughed until their sides shook. A few, however, grew curious. Why would a human care so much? Why risk shame in front of so many? The merchant lowered the Tifra slightly, tilting his head. "You are strange, human. Very strange. Perhaps too strange." Miran stood his ground, even as the guards closed in. His hand trembled at his side, but his eyes stayed on the trembling creature. He knew, in that moment, that a choice had been made. Whatever happened next, he would not walk away. The fire crackled behind him, hot and hungry. The cages rattled as the Tifra whimpered. The crowd leaned forward, waiting to see what the human would do next. Miran took a slow breath. His heart pounded, but his voice was steady. "These lives matter," he said. The words hung in the air like a spark. The silence of the marketplace did not last long. After Miran's words, the crowd broke into laughter again, louder than before. Some clapped their hands, others stomped their feet on the stone floor, shaking the stalls around them. The Xeric merchant still held the Tifra puppy in his hand. The little creature trembled, its golden fur catching the light of the fire pit. The merchant smirked, his sharp teeth flashing. "You say these lives matter," he said slowly, as if tasting the words. "Strange talk. Human talk. But here, strength matters. Weakness is eaten, not protected. That is the way." Miran stood tall, though his palms were damp with sweat. He looked at the merchant directly. "Strength is not only in the body. It is also in the heart. Protecting the weak is not weakness. It is a different kind of strength." The guard beside the merchant barked out a harsh laugh. "Heart strength? What use is that in battle? What use when you starve? When you are hungry, will you hug your food?" The crowd cheered at the guard's words. Many pointed at Miran, shaking their heads. To them, he was a fool, a stranger who thought kindness had value. But Miran's voice did not shake. He pointed toward the cages of Tifra. "Look at them. They trust. Even in fear, they reached for me. They did not bite, they did not fight. They believed I could help. That trust is not food. That trust is a gift." For a moment, some in the crowd grew quieter. A few tilted their heads, their scales catching the light. But the merchant quickly lifted the tifra higher, breaking the silence. "Listen to him," the merchant mocked. "He speaks as if these soft things are more than meat. But here, we know truth. The strong rule, the weak serve or are eaten. That is the law of survival." Miran's jaw tightened. He remembered Earth's history, the wars, the cruelty, and the slow path humans took to change. There was a time when people thought only power mattered. But humanity had learned, through pain and mistakes, that compassion built something power could not. He thought of the stray dog from his childhood again. That small creature, weak and hungry, had chosen to trust him. Protecting it had not made him weaker. It had made him stronger inside. It had taught him courage. Taking a step forward, Miran said firmly, "Your law of survival is old. On Earth, we learned another way. We learned that helping others makes everyone stronger. When you protect the weak, you build trust. When you build trust, you gain allies. That is how we grew." The merchant narrowed his eyes. "Allies? With food?" Miran did not flinch. "Yes. With food, with animals, with each other. We learned that life is not only for eating or conquering. Life is for sharing. For building. That is why we came to the stars. Not because we ate everything, but because we dreamed of more." The crowd buzzed. Some shouted at Miran, calling him foolish. Others whispered among themselves. A few young Xeric looked thoughtful, their expressions less certain than before. The guard stepped forward, his heavy arm blocking Miran's path. "You speak too much. Words do not change hunger. Words do not change fire. You want these creatures? Pay double the price, or leave." Miran's hand went to his small pouch of credits. He knew he did not have enough. The Xeric used high prices for outsiders, and this merchant was clearly enjoying the chance to make him suffer. Still, Miran pulled out the pouch and opened it. "I will pay what I have. Every coin. Take it, and give me the tifra." The merchant sneered. "Not enough. A hand would make better payment." He made a slicing motion across his own wrist, and the crowd roared with laughter again. Miran felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had heard of this punishment before. Among the Xeric, theft or disrespect was sometimes punished by cutting off a hand. To them, it was a lesson: do not touch what is not yours unless you are strong enough to keep it. The merchant stepped closer, holding the trembling tifra just above the fire pit. "Choose, human. Pay with coin and fail. Pay with your hand and take. Or step back and watch the feast." Miran's throat felt dry. His hand twitched at his side. The fire cracked loudly, as if waiting for the little creature. The smell of smoke pressed against his nose. In that moment, the marketplace seemed smaller, tighter. The crowd leaned closer, eyes glowing with interest. To them, this was entertainment. A strange human, standing against tradition. Would he fold, or would he fight? Miran looked at the tifra. Its small body shook, its glowing eyes locked on him. He felt something stir deep inside his chest. A memory of Earth, of his mother's voice. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing what is right, even when you are afraid. He stepped forward again, his shadow falling across the fire pit. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded. "I will not step back. If you call me weak for caring, then call me weak. But I will not watch them burn." The crowd went silent for a heartbeat. Then shouts burst out again, some mocking, some cheering. The guard growled and grabbed Miran's shoulder, but Miran did not move away. The merchant tilted his head, eyes narrowing. He seemed both amused and irritated. You risk much, human. All for creatures that cannot even speak. Miran's answer was simple. They do speak. Not with words, but with trust. That is enough for me. For the first time, the merchant did not laugh. He studied Miran, then looked at the Tifra, still trembling in his grip. The little creature's glowing eyes reflected the fire, but also something else, a spark of hope. The crowd began to chant. Some demanded the human be punished. Others shouted for him to prove his words. The noise grew louder, filling the air like a storm. The merchant raised his free hand, silencing them. Very well, he said at last. If you want to keep these weak ones, then we will see if your courage is real. Step forward, human. Show us your strength of heart, and face the law of the Xeric. Miran's chest tightened, but he lifted his chin. He could not turn back now. He had spoken his truth, and now the choice was set before him. The fire crackled, the cages rattled, and the eyes of the crowd burned bright. Miran took one slow step forward. The merchant's voice echoed across the crowded market. Step forward, human. Show us your strength of heart, if you truly believe in it. The Xeric crowd parted, forming a wide circle around the fire pit. Their voices lowered to murmurs, waiting to see what the stranger would do. The smell of smoke and roasted spices hung heavy in the air. The flames licked higher, orange light reflecting on scales and steel. Miran felt his legs grow heavy, but he forced them to move. Each step toward the fire seemed louder than the noise of the crowd. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest. He had never been the center of so many eyes before. Every gaze carried either curiosity, mockery, or hunger for spectacle. The merchant still held the Tifra above the flames. The little creature struggled weakly, its glowing eyes locked on Miran. Its cries were drowned out by the crackling of the fire and the whispers of the crowd. One guard stepped close to Miran, raising a heavy blade. The weapon shimmered with a dull edge, its purpose clear. The law of Xeric is simple, the guard said with a cold smile. If you take what is not yours, you lose the hand that touched it. You still have time to turn back, human. Walk away, and you will keep both hands. Miran's throat felt dry. He looked down at his own hands, scarred from years of labor, strong enough to repair machines and carry heavy tools. He imagined life without one of them, the struggle it would bring. But then he looked back at the Tifra. Its small body trembled, and yet it still looked at him with trust, as if it knew he was its only chance. A voice in his mind whispered, "Walk away. Save yourself." Another voice answered, "If you walk away, you will never forgive yourself." Miran straightened his shoulders. If the law demands I lose a hand for saving life, then so be it. I will not step back. The guard raised his blade higher, and the crowd roared with excitement. Many shouted for the punishment to begin. Others laughed, eager to see the strange human humbled. Yet a few in the back remained silent, their faces thoughtful. Before the blade could fall, Miran suddenly reached forward. His hand shot toward the cage closest to him. With a quick movement, he pulled it away from the fire pit. The Tifra inside squeaked loudly, pressing against the bars in relief. The crowd gasped. The guard's blade stopped mid-air, shock flashing across his face. He had not expected the human to act so boldly. The merchant snarled, lowering the Tifra he held. You dare. Miran clutched the cage tightly, his knuckles white. His heart raced, but his voice stayed steady. I dare, because it is right. The market erupted in chaos. Some Xeric shouted for the guard to strike. Others demanded the human face trial. A few younger voices whispered about the courage it took to step forward against the fire. The guard's eyes narrowed. You touched what is not yours. The law is clear. Your hand must be taken. Miran held the cage close to his chest. The small creatures inside pressed against the bars, their eyes glowing with fear and hope. He felt their trembling, and that trembling gave him strength. If this is your law, he said firmly, then I accept it. But know this, cutting my hand will not prove strength. It will only prove fear. Fear of compassion, fear of change. The guard snarled, raising the blade again. The crowd leaned forward, waiting. The fire crackled louder, as if hungry for the moment. Just then, something unexpected happened. One of the Tifra inside the cage slipped a tiny paw through the bars and touched Miran's hand. Its fur was warm, its touch gentle. It licked his skin softly, unaware of the danger surrounding them. The crowd grew quiet. The simple act struck them harder than any words. A creature they considered weak and mindless was showing loyalty, showing trust in the human who risked himself. Whispers spread like sparks in the wind. Why would it do that? One alien asked. They do not act this way with us, another muttered. Why does it trust him? The guard hesitated, blade still raised. His eyes flickered to the tiny paw resting on the human's hand. The merchant growled, trying to regain control of the moment. Do not be fooled by tricks of weak animals. They do not understand. They are food, nothing more. But his voice did not carry the same power as before. The crowd no longer laughed. Some looked uncertain, others even uneasy. Miran saw the shift. He knew this was his chance. He lifted the cage higher, letting the crowd see the Tifra clinging to his hand. His voice rose above the crackle of fire. They know more than you think. They feel fear, and they feel trust. They know kindness when they see it. If you burn them, you burn more than flesh. You burn the chance to be better. The firelight danced across his face, his eyes steady and unbroken. The Tifra inside the cage pressed closer, their glowing eyes reflecting the flames. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then voices broke out again, but this time they were different. Some still demanded punishment, but others spoke with doubt. Perhaps the human is right, one muttered. Perhaps weakness is not what we thought, another whispered. The guard lowered his blade slightly, his face troubled. The merchant, however, was furious. He slammed the Tifra he held back into its cage and shouted, Enough! This is foolishness. Weak words, weak acts. Our law must stand, or chaos will follow. He pointed at Miran. Take his hand, now. The guard hesitated. His grip on the blade tightened, but his eyes shifted between the human, the Tifra, and the uncertain crowd. Miran did not move. He held the cage close, his face calm though his heart thundered. If you strike me, he said softly, strike knowing you kill trust. Strike knowing you choose fear over strength. The guard's blade trembled in the firelight. The crowd waited, the entire marketplace balanced on a single decision. The guard's blade hung in the air, heavy with indecision. The fire snapped and hissed, throwing sparks into the night sky. The crowd waited, silent but restless, as if the entire market was holding its breath. At last, the guard lowered his weapon. He stepped back, his voice uncertain. This choice is not mine. It belongs to the High Seat. Let the leader decide the fate of this human. The crowd erupted in noise again, but this time not with laughter. There were shouts of anger, others of agreement, and some even of curiosity. A path opened through the market as guards moved forward, surrounding Miran. One took the cage from his arms, but Miran clung to it until another guard struck the bars with the flat of his blade. The Tifra inside whimpered, and only then did Miran slowly loosen his grip. "Bring him," the merchant growled. His face was dark with rage, his pride wounded by the hesitation of the crowd. Let the leader show what happens when a human insults our ways. The guards pushed Miran forward. He stumbled once but caught himself. His heart beat fast, yet his eyes stayed steady. He knew this was not the end. This was only another step. The path led to the center of the Xeric city, where the leader's hall stood. It was a wide building of black stone, its walls carved with sharp symbols. Tall fire bowls lit the entrance, shadows flickering across the doors. The hall smelled of ash and iron, the scent of judgment. Inside, the air was cooler but heavy. At the far end, on a seat carved from stone and bone, sat the leader of the Xeric. His scales were darker than the rest, his eyes sharp and unblinking. He wore a cloak of thick hide across his shoulders, and in his hand rested a staff tipped with a curved blade. The guards shoved Miran to the center of the floor. The merchant stepped forward quickly, bowing before the leader. "High One," he said, his voice rising with practiced drama, "this human has insulted our laws. He dared to touch what is not his. He dared to steal food from my fire. He mocked our strength with weak words of pity. I demand punishment. By our law, his hand must be taken." The leader's eyes moved from the merchant to Miran. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence pressed against Miran's ears, heavy and sharp. Then the leader leaned forward. His voice was deep, calm, but carrying weight like a mountain. "Human," he said, "you stand accused of breaking our law. You reached into fire that was not yours. You touched what belongs to another. Do you deny it?" Miran took a slow breath. His voice was steady. "I do not deny it. I touched the cage. I took it away from the fire." A murmur ran through the hall. Some seemed pleased with his honesty, others whispered angrily. The leader tilted his head. "And why? Did you not know the law of the Xeric?" "I knew," Miran answered. His eyes did not waver. "But I could not stand aside. Those creatures were alive, and they trusted me. To watch them burn would have broken something inside me. So I acted." The leader's eyes narrowed. "You value the lives of animals over your own hand." "I value what they stand for," Miran said. His voice grew stronger with each word. "On my world, we once thought only power mattered. We hunted without care, fought without mercy, and called it strength. But we learned another way. We learned that protecting the weak makes us stronger. That compassion is not weakness. It is courage." The hall grew quieter. Even the guards seemed still, their eyes shifting between Miran and their leader. The merchant broke the silence with a sharp laugh. "Courage? He speaks nonsense. High One, he speaks of soft hearts. If we follow him, we will starve. If we follow him, we will fall to those stronger than us. Do not be fooled. This human hides weakness in pretty words." Miran turned toward the merchant. "If you believe compassion is weakness, then why do you fear my words?" If your way is truly strong, it should not be shaken by one voice. The merchant's mouth snapped shut, his eyes flashing with anger. The crowd of aliens who had followed into the hall whispered among themselves. Some nodded at Miran's words, others shook their heads. The leader remained still, watching every movement, every sound. At last, the leader rose from his seat. He walked slowly down the steps, his staff tapping against the stone floor. Each step echoed through the hall, filling the silence. He stopped in front of Miran, towering over him. He lifted the staff and placed the curved blade against Miran's hand. The cold metal pressed into his skin. The hall grew tense, breaths held, waiting for the strike. You know our law, the leader said softly. A hand for what you touched. That is our way. Why should I spare you? Miran looked at the blade, then back into the leader's sharp eyes. His heart raced, but his words came clear. Because laws should not only serve the strong. Laws should serve truth. I touched that cage, yes. But I did not take it for greed. I did not take it to insult. I took it to protect life. If your law cannot see the difference, then perhaps it is not strength, but fear. The leader's eyes flickered. For a brief moment, there was something almost unreadable in them, doubt, or perhaps curiosity. He pulled the blade back slightly, resting the staff against the floor once more. He turned to the hall. His voice boomed like thunder. This human stands by his words without fear. He speaks of compassion as strength. Strange, but his courage is real. Should such a voice be silenced, or heard? The hall erupted. Some shouted for punishment, others for mercy. The sound rose like a storm, shaking the walls. The leader raised his staff high, and silence fell once more. He looked back at Miran. I will not strike today. But know this, human, your ideas are dangerous. They spread doubt. They weaken order. If you remain, you may change more than you intend. Miran's chest lifted as he breathed, relief mixing with resolve. Then let change come, he said quietly. The leader's gaze lingered on him, hard and sharp. Then he turned away, motioning to the guards. Take him back to the market. His fate is not sealed. The people will decide what strength means. The guards pulled Miran back, leading him toward the door. The merchant sputtered in anger, but he could do nothing. The leader had spoken. As Miran stepped out of the hall, he looked back once. The firelight glowed against the black stone walls. He knew his trial was not over. It had only just begun. The marketplace was crowded again by the time Miran was brought back from the hall. Word had spread quickly. A human had stood before the leader, risking his hand for creatures that others saw only as food. Every stall was buzzing with talk. Some mocked him, others admired his boldness. The guards pushed Miran into the center of the circle near the fire pits once more. The cages of Tifra still stood stacked on the merchant's stall. Their soft cries carried through the air, small voices almost lost in the roar of the crowd. The merchant stood proudly beside them, anger twisting his face. Here he is, he shouted, raising his arms high. The weak human who dares to challenge our way. The leader has spared his hand for now, but the people will decide. Should such weakness live among us? Or should he be broken before all? The crowd roared, some shouting for punishment, others demanding to hear the human speak again. Miran stood quietly, his body tired but his spirit unshaken. His eyes went to the cages. The Tifra huddled together, golden fur pressed tight, glowing eyes watching him. He felt their fear, and their hope, like a weight pressing into his chest. One guard barked out, "Let the human speak. Let him explain again why he risks pain for creatures that cannot fight." The merchant laughed harshly. "Yes. Let him speak. And then we will see how foolish he sounds when placed against our truth." Miran looked around at the circle of Xeric faces. Some were sharp with anger, some curious, a few almost thoughtful. He raised his voice, calm but steady, so it carried over the fire. "I acted because I could not walk away," he said. "On my world, we once thought as you do. We believed only the strong deserved to live. We destroyed the weak, we hunted without care, we fought without mercy. And in doing so, we nearly destroyed ourselves. But we learned. We learned that strength without kindness leads only to emptiness. True strength is not in crushing the weak. It is in protecting them, even when it costs us." Some in the crowd murmured at his words. Others shook their heads. The merchant sneered. "Pretty words. But when hunger burns, do words fill your stomach? When enemies come with blades, do words defend your home? You speak of softness, human, but softness has no place among us." Miran faced him directly. "Is it softness when a mother shields her young? Is it softness when one friend stands in front of another to block harm? No. That is courage. That is the truest kind of strength." As he spoke, a sound broke through the noise of the market. A faint scraping. One of the cages shifted. Then, to everyone's surprise, a tiffer pushed its nose through the bars. With effort, it slipped out, tumbling onto the ground. The crowd gasped as the small creature scrambled across the stone floor, straight toward Miran. The guards moved to stop it, but the tiffer darted quickly, its tiny paws tapping against the stones. It reached Miran's boots, stood on its hind legs, and pressed its front paws against him. Then, in front of the entire market, it licked his hand. The crowd fell into stunned silence. The merchant's mouth opened but no words came. The guards froze, blades half raised. The tiffer leaned against Miran as if he were its protector, glowing eyes full of trust. A whisper rippled through the crowd. "It chooses him," someone said. Another voice followed. "These creatures never do this with us. Why does it trust him?" The silence broke into argument. Some shouted that it was a trick, others that it was a sign. Young Xeric pointed, their eyes wide. "It trusts him. The food trusts him." Miran knelt and lifted the tiffer gently into his arms. The small creature curled against his chest, trembling but safe. He looked back at the crowd. "You see? They know. They can feel who will harm them and who will protect them. They chose to trust me. That is not weakness. That is a bond stronger than fear." The merchant roared with anger, his pride tearing at him. "Lies. Illusion. These creatures are only meat. They do not choose. They do not think. You trick us with stories of earth." But his voice no longer carried the same weight. Too many had seen the moment with their own eyes. Too many felt the shift in the air. One young Xeric stepped forward, her scales shining pale in the firelight. "High One spared him," she said. "Perhaps it was for this reason. Perhaps there is more in these creatures than we believed." Another older Xeric growled but nodded slowly. "I have lost young ones in battle. I saw them cling to me, trusting me to protect them. When I see this creature cling to him, I cannot call it only meat." The crowd stirred with noise, half in doubt, half in awakening. The merchant grew desperate. He snatched another cage, lifting it high, shaking it so the Tifra inside squealed. Do not forget what you are. We are strong because we do not bend. This human brings poison into your thoughts. If you listen to him, you will fall. The small Tifra in Miran's arms whimpered at the sound of its kin. Miran's heart clenched. He stood tall, raising his voice so it carried above the merchant's shouts. You call it poison, but I call it hope. You fear these ideas because they change what you know. But change is not weakness. Change is how we grow. On earth, we grew because we learned to see life as more than prey. And if you learn this too, then you will not fall. You will rise higher than ever before. The fire cracked, sparks flying into the air. The crowd's voices rose again, a storm of debate. Some shouted with the merchant, some with Miran. The guards looked uneasy, caught between tradition and doubt. For the first time, the merchant looked uncertain. His eyes darted to the crowd, seeing the cracks in their certainty. He slammed the cage down, his voice trembling with fury. Enough. The leader will regret sparing you. You twist our people with your lies. But Miran saw the shift. He saw the doubt spreading. And he knew this was the turning point. The Tifra in his arms snuggled closer, glowing eyes calm now, as if sensing safety. The crowd could not unsee this moment. They had witnessed trust stronger than fear. The market was quieter now, but the tension was still thick in the air. Miran held the small Tifra carefully in his arms. Its soft body pressed against him, its glowing eyes bright and calm. The other cages of Tifra remained on the merchant's stall, but the creatures inside were silent now, as if watching to see what would happen next. The crowd of Xeric had begun to shift. Some still looked angry, but others whispered among themselves, faces thoughtful. They had seen the loyalty of the Tifra, the courage of the human, and a seed of doubt had been planted. The idea that strength could exist in kindness was new to them. The merchant stomped his scaled foot, slamming the cage down. Do not be fooled, he shouted. These creatures are only prey. You cannot change their nature, and you cannot change the ways of the strong. This human poisons your thoughts. Miran looked around calmly. I do not poison, he said. I show. I show that courage is not only in fire or weapons. Courage is also in protecting life. Strength is also in caring. The crowd murmured. A few younger Xeric stepped closer, eyes wide. We have never seen this, one whispered to another. This human dares more than any Xeric we know. Miran knelt and placed the Tifra gently on the ground. It did not run away. Instead, it stood beside him, looking up, its trust clear. Another small Tifra began to crawl out of its cage, timid but curious. Then another followed. Soon, a group of them gathered near Miran's feet. The sight was unexpected and powerful. The merchant's face twisted in disbelief. This is impossible, he growled. They are weak. They cannot think for themselves. They are food. But the crowd was beginning to question. Perhaps not all strength is physical, one elder muttered. Perhaps the human sees something we do not. Miran smiled faintly. They are alive, yes. They are small, yes. But their hearts are brave. They trust when others would not. That trust is powerful. That trust can change the way we live. The merchant's voice rose, sharp and desperate. Do not listen to him. Do not bend to this human. If you follow his words, you will lose control. You will be weak. But some Zirek were no longer listening to him. They had seen the courage and the bond between Miran and the Tifra. The younger ones, who had always questioned traditions, began to speak. "Maybe we have been wrong," a young Zirek said. "Perhaps strength is more than eating the weak. Perhaps kindness is also power." Another added, "We have seen animals die in fire and thought it was the way. But these creatures show more loyalty than many warriors. They choose to trust. That is not weakness." The merchant's anger grew. He tried to raise his voice, but the crowd no longer followed. Murmurs of agreement and curiosity rose louder. The balance of the market had shifted. Miran knelt and extended his hand to the small Tifra at his feet. It climbed onto his arm, its soft body warm. He held it high for all to see. "This is what I protect. Not because it is food, not because it is weak, but because it is life. Every being that trusts us, every being that feels, is worth our courage." The leader's words echoed in his memory, "Your ideas are dangerous. They spread doubt." Miran realized that was true. He was dangerous to their old way. But change was necessary. If he could show that courage included compassion, that strength included mercy, then perhaps the Zirek could grow beyond fear. The crowd of Zirek began to shift openly. Many approached Miran and the Tifra cautiously. They touched the small creatures, feeling their warmth, their life, their trust. Faces once stern and cold softened. Even some older Zirek, who had once mocked humans, began to nod slowly. "We have been blind," one said. "We have thought only in fire and bite. But this human teaches more than any lesson of strength." The merchant's fury could not stop the change. His shouts were drowned out by the whispers and curiosity of the crowd. Guards lowered their weapons slightly, unsure what action to take. Miran knelt again, placing the Tifra gently back on the ground. They scrambled around his feet, tails wagging, eyes glowing softly. The crowd watched quietly, many in awe. "You see," Miran said gently. "Strength is not only survival. Strength is respect. Strength is trust. When you protect the weak, you protect yourself as well. When you choose mercy, you show courage no fire can destroy." The market had transformed. It was no longer a place of mockery and fear. It was a place of thought and awakening. The older Zirek, the young, the guards, and even some merchants began to understand. They were beginning to question old traditions. The Tifra scattered happily near Miran's feet. Some climbed small crates, exploring. Others pressed against his boots, playful and trusting. Their behavior was simple, but their effect was profound. The merchant stomped his foot, trying one last time to reclaim authority. "This cannot be. Humans are weak. You cannot follow him." But the crowd ignored him. Young Zirek whispered, "He is not weak. He is strong in ways we do not know." Elders murmured, "Perhaps we should learn from him." Miran looked at the crowd, then down at the Tifra. He smiled softly. "You see what I mean," he said. "Courage is more than fire and teeth. Compassion is more than softness. Life is more than survival. Strength comes in many forms, and mercy is one of the greatest." A few guards knelt before him, offering to help carry the cages safely. Others began to talk among themselves about protecting the Tifra rather than roasting them. The merchant finally backed away, realizing his power was slipping. His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. The market had shifted, and even he could not stop it. Miran knew the change would not be complete immediately. Habits and laws did not vanish in a day. But the spark was lit. The Tifra were safe for now, and the Xeric had seen a different kind of strength, one that came from care, trust, and courage. He picked up a small Tifra and held it gently in his arms. Its body pressed against his chest, warm and trusting. Miran smiled. The risk he had taken, the courage he had shown, was not in vain. And for the first time, he believed that even among a species so different from humans, mercy and compassion could inspire change. The marketplace was alive with whispers of new ideas. The Tifr played near Miran's feet, the crowd watched in quiet amazement, and Miran felt the weight of the future shift slightly. Courage had won that day, and the change had begun. The sun had begun to rise over the Xeric city, casting long shadows across the marketplace. The fires of the night were fading, leaving only a few smoldering embers behind. Miran stood in the center, surrounded by the small Tifra. Their soft golden fur glowed in the morning light, and their eyes sparkled with trust and happiness. The marketplace was quiet but alive in a new way. Merchants and guards moved about, but there was no shouting, no threats. The energy had shifted. Conversations were calm, thoughtful, and full of wonder. The lesson of the night had spread among the Xeric. The merchant, once proud and loud, now stood silently to the side. His cages remained untouched, but he watched with a mixture of anger and amazement. He could not deny what had happened. The human had changed something in the hearts of the people. Miran bent down and picked up a small Tifra. Its tiny paws clung to his arms, and it nuzzled his cheek. He smiled. "It is all right," he whispered gently. "You are safe now." A group of young Xeric approached him cautiously. They had been the first to question the old ways, the first to see that compassion could be a kind of strength. One stepped forward and spoke. "Human, we have never seen courage like yours. Not from any Xeric. You protect what others would destroy. You teach what others would ignore. Can we learn from you?" Miran nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "You can learn. And it starts with small acts. Protect those who trust you. Care for those who cannot defend themselves. Stand for life, even when it is difficult. Strength is more than fire and teeth. It is also heart and courage." The crowd listened quietly. Even the older Xeric nodded, their expressions thoughtful. The lesson had been clear. Miran had not only saved the Tifra, he had opened the eyes of an entire community. The merchant finally stepped forward, though his voice was low. "Human, you have changed more than you know. The Tifra trust you, the people watch you. Perhaps your ways hold a power we do not understand." Miran looked at him calmly. "It is not magic. It is courage and compassion. Every being has the ability to change the world if they choose to care." The market remained in silence for a moment, the air thick with understanding. Then, slowly, a young Xeric lifted a small cage, carrying it to safety. Another followed. Soon, the Tifra were released from their cages, crawling and tumbling around the market without fear. Some ran to Miran, others explored the stalls, their golden fur shining brightly. The Xeric began to watch and learn. They realized that protecting the weak did not make them weak. It gave them new respect, new understanding. The children played among the Tifra, laughing softly. The elders observed quietly, nodding as they realized the value of life beyond strength. Miran knelt on the ground, letting a Tifra climb onto his shoulders. "See," he said softly, "they are not just creatures. They are life. Every being matters. And every choice we make can build strength, not only for ourselves, but for all. The merchant finally turned away, silent. He could not argue with what had happened. The lesson was clear. The market had changed, and he could not undo it. News of the humans' courage spread through the city and beyond. Other markets began to change their ways. Some Xeric traders stopped selling Tifra for food, choosing instead to protect them. Communities that once valued only fire and teeth began to see value in mercy, in trust, and in life. Miran continued to stay with the Tifra for several days, teaching the young Xeric how to care for them. He showed them how to feed them, how to play safely, and how to understand the creature's signals. Slowly, the bond between human and Xeric grew. They learned from each other, and the Tifra became a symbol of the change Miran had inspired. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Miran watched the Tifra play among the Xeric children. He felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of peace. He had risked his hand, risked his safety, and perhaps risked the patience of the leader. Yet he had achieved more than he could have imagined. A young Xeric approached him, holding a small glowing crystal. "For courage," the child said softly, pressing it into Miran's hand. "So that we remember what strength can be." Miran accepted it with a smile. "I will remember," he said. "And so will you. Remember that every act of care builds courage. Every life you protect strengthens you more than any fire or blade." The Tifra clustered around him, tails wagging, eyes glowing softly. They nuzzled him gently, a quiet acknowledgement of trust and gratitude. Miran laughed softly. "You are braver than many of us," he said, "and today, you helped teach a lesson that no fire could have taught alone." By the time night fell, the market had transformed completely. The stalls were quiet, the fire pits cold, and the Tifra roamed freely among the Xeric, protected and cherished. The people had learned a new way to see strength. They had seen that courage could come in many forms, and that kindness could change hearts even stronger than fear or power. Miran knew it was only the beginning. Change was a slow journey, but the first step had been taken. He had left a mark, not just on the Tifra, but on the Xeric themselves. The spark of courage and compassion would grow. He looked at the city skyline, the glowing towers stretching into the night. For the first time since arriving, he felt at home. Not because the city was familiar, but because he had shared something important. He had shown that life, trust, and courage could shape the world. And as he watched the Tifra tumble and play, glowing softly in the moonlight, he knew their legacy would continue. The bond between human and alien, between bravery and kindness, had taken root. The market, the city, and the people would never be the same again. Miran smiled, lifting a small Tifra into his arms one last time for the day. "We did well," he whispered. "The world can be stronger with kindness, braver with courage, and brighter with trust. Remember that, little ones." The Tifra licked his hands softly, a quiet answer. Miran knew that their trust, and the courage it inspired, would live on long after he had left the city. The story of the human who risked everything to save the weak would become a tale of hope, courage, and the true meaning of strength for generations to come.